Hello, my name's Charles Brennan, and I'm the editor of the International Journal of Food Science and Technology, and welcome to another Coffee with the Editor session. And with me today, we're in Copenhagen.
Yes.
Nice and cold Copenhagen at this time of the year, with Esteban Echeverria-Jaramillo.
Yeah, it's okay, yes.
From Copenhagen University. And
yes.
we wanted to talk a little bit about your recent paper about Aquasoya powder and putting that into yogurts and yogurt alternatives that are plant-based. Tell me about your paper. Where did the idea come from and who were your collaborators?
Well, this idea actually comes from a work we've been doing over the past 4 years now already with this Aquasoya, under this umbrella of Aquasoya.
Yeah.
So the collaborators that I want to acknowledge now are John Hetty, the first author of the paper, which is the master student who worked on this research, and Professor Shingwonson, who is the professor, the head of the lab. And then I was collaborating with both of them to actually push this final application forward. And it's what I'm telling you, it's something that came 4 years ago when I started my PhD. I did my PhD in Korea at Professor Won Sung-shin lab. And then the idea behind it is that, aquafaba is a well-known egg white substitute these days, and it still hasn't broken into the market so strongly, but it's trying because of its properties, right? Foaming properties and emulsifying properties especially. So the idea was to adapt this concept to the Korean context. In Asia, chickpea is not something, at least in that part of Asia, it's not a pulse that is consumed as much as others like soybeans.
Yeah.
Soybeans are staples of many different foods over there. So the cooking water generates a lot of waste. And we wanted to take that and try to do something with that in an analogy to the aquafaba, right? So first we started characterizing this water, seeing what we can do, and then trying to compare with egg white and chickpea, and then seeing if it has the properties that we thought it could have, and then it does. And then actually I've published with you 3 papers so far in your journal.
I know, thank you. I was just looking. You published one in last year and also the year before as well.
Yeah, exactly. Those were parts of the efforts of my work with in that lab, in the Korean lab. Yeah, exactly. First, we just characterized functionality and then composition, but then we wanted to see, okay, let's try to make it more industrial. Like we don't want this to stay only like on the papers. We want to see if there's a possibility to actually move into something to apply.
Yeah.
And that's we get a very diluted liquid at the beginning from the cooking of the soybeans that we were sourcing from small producers.
So the aquafaba, because I know about aquafaba in terms of the chickpea residue.
Yes.
And that's in the liquid that is not the canned sort of chickpea, as it were. But how does that differ in terms of soybean? What did you do with there? How did you recover that?
Yeah, exactly. So the aquafaba, mostly use aquafaba, let's say it's from the canned chickpeas, as you will say, that people just separated at home and started mixing and finding out how to do vegan stuff. But then in the case of the soybean is more produced either industrially, soybean products, industrially or like in small companies, right? So what they do is they cook it in like big pressure pots, pressure cookers, and then they strain it. They keep the beans for whatever formulation they do, which are fermented sauces, many of the condiments of traditional Korean cooking. And then the water was just hopefully treated or just thrown away, unfortunately. And then so that was mostly our approach, to try to take this water from the small producers who were making these condiments in a more artisanal way, and then try to find a solution to this waste.
So you're trying to recover that waste product that would otherwise be thrown away.
Yes, exactly.
And use that in alternative plant-based food systems. Now, yogurt's a really interesting scenario. How do you make it into yogurt?
So, if I may, I'll go a bit back into this story, because I think actually this application, and there is another one with ice cream from another member of the lab in which I didn't participate, but I'm aware of, and I should get to that afterwards. So we get the water, right? But then and the first paper published in your journal was about how to concentrate it, how to transition from this very diluted liquid to something that is worth the spray drying, because spray drying being so energy intensive, we don't want to put a very diluted liquid, so we want to concentrate somehow. So we try to analyze different ways of concentrating, a very traditional stovetop, like boiling while mixing, and another one more industrially oriented, which was a centrifugal concentrator. And then one in the middle, which was something that these small companies can actually do, which was cryoconcentration. And then, well, we just saw what we found, and how the effect of the concentration affected the functional properties. But then, even if we did that, we found that the most industrially oriented way was the centrifugal concentrator. It's a special machine that it's a Japanese machine, but I think it's all over the world now. And so, because even if we don't want to go into a lot of energy intensive processes, sometimes you have to like establish that, right? Because what we want to have is not like a liquid. We just want to have a powder, an ingredient that we can apply to the industry. And that's when it comes. Once we have the ingredient, I think we start exploring, we start playing, like we can do many things, right? And the first application was one that I was leading, was using that instead of methyl cellulose in plant-based meats. To try to,
as a binder.
As a binder, exactly.
Okay,
yeah. We found that it was somehow successful, although we needed to increase the concentration about 12% compared to methyl cellulose, which is usually used at 3%. So, but still, we kind of see that there was an application. So with that, we started thinking of what other plant-based materials or products are on demand in the market. And then it came the idea of doing yogurt, and mainly for the reason that this powder is only like 20% protein. Well, it's about 60-65% carbohydrates.
Gosh, okay.
So instead of being a protein concentrator, like its functional properties don't rely on the protein, it's what we think. It's more about the conjunction of the two of the macromolecules working together. So we said like, oh, maybe these 65% are fermentable sugars. So let's try to ferment and see what happens. And that's exactly what Heiji did. And then we started seeing that she applied different cultures and different formulations to try to come up with this yogurt based on the Aquasoya, like without any dairy. So the main, instead of milk, we are doing an emulsion to try to, yeah.
So you completely swapped out the dairy protein and carbohydrate, but protein, and used the aqua. Okay. Cool.
Yeah. So I think that's we are not using it as an additive. We're using it for the first time in this paper as the main ingredient, let's say.
So you could class it as a vegan yogurt?
Yes, I would say so, unless the culture. No, we use vegan cultures. I know. Vegan optimized cultures, because in bacteria, I don't know, the restrictions that vegans may go through, they are willing to eat bacteria, but I think it's okay for them. But yeah, it's completely vegan. The rest of the ingredients are just sugar and some small gums, if I'm not wrong, and then just stabilizers and oil just to get the mouthfeel. Yeah.
So what did the consumers think about it? Did you give it to some consumers in the end in a pilot study or something?
Yeah, there was a preliminary consumer test with a few consumers, and the dairy one was, the control was better liked, of course, because we still have some unusual flavors that are coming up because it's coming from soybeans. So soybean is not a flavor people don't like, but then if you think about it in the context of yogurt, it's still off-putting. But I think that as many things, it could still be worked on. Like, I think these are initial steps. And the most important thing was to prove the viability of the bacteria to grow there and to create a texture similar to yogurt and be source of fermentable carbohydrates. So yeah, but definitely taste and smell is something that should be improved.
And do you see that industry may take this on in the future here in Denmark or in Korea or elsewhere?
Well, that's something we discussed a lot, and now I'm also working with some other byproducts from agriculture because after Korea I moved to Denmark and I'm doing my postdoc here, but I still keep collaborating with the Korean lab. And one of the most important issues, as you might well know, is the logistics of the situation of recovering the waste, treating it fast enough so it doesn't degrade, and being able to project it industrially, because the raw material is pretty cheap. It should be free if you think about it. Of course, we would start compensating the people producing it, but so the cost there would be very low. But then the logistics of getting it exactly the day of production. So there were alternatives to that people were working on, and one was we started working before I left with a big company there that produces tempeh. So they were starting cooking and they were figuring out like, okay, we want to collect it, so we need some sort of solution, and the idea was to install there some concentrator or some design the plant in order to go straight to the drying. That it's taking a while because of many economical constraints. And then I was also contacted, I was talking to an Israeli company who is actually doing this. So the idea is they go to farms, they go to places where they cook, not with soybeans, they were working with other pulses, trying to install the necessary equipment or teach the farmers or producers to be able to produce their own powder. So I think that it would be there, the thing that, you know, getting this barrier off of the constraints of the logistics by installing on-site processing.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like a really fascinating story that will continue. But
yes.
We've got to wrap up now, but if you were going to be explaining that to a camera, let's say, in a short soundbite, you know how these elevator lifts and things like that sort of pictures go. If you're going to say that to the consumer in sort of 10 words or 10 sentences, what would you say about this paper as the fundamental objectives and outcomes?
Yep. Well, so we are taking this waste material from the cooking of soybeans, and then we are taking advantage of its fermentable carbohydrates to offer a medium for the creation of plant-based dairy alternatives. And we proved that it is possible, and we are opening the door for the development of many other products based on this one. I think that's
thank you very much, Esteban.
Thank you.
And we'll continue this conversation now, but in the meantime, thank you very much for a coffee with the editor session. I will put a link to Esteban's papers at the end of this podcast, and we will continue this conversation now, but thank you very much. And